My name is Mike Cottmeyer. Really appreciate the invite from Justice and Pablo. I've been in business for about 16 years. A little different than maybe some of the other companies that have come up here. We're a consulting company. We work kind of at the intersection of business process reengineering and technology. And so lots of applications. Sometimes for like the industrial and systems engineering kids, I'll say something like, we're like an industrial and systems engineering firm for software factories. Right, so we end up touching a lot of business process, a lot of technical architecture, a lot of data. Obviously, AI is impacting us quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, it's just lots of pivots going on right now.
Yeah. So what prompted you to, found your company? And can you tell us a story? Like, where did it start and where is it going?
Yeah. So very, very inauspicious, right? So working in corporate America, doing project and program management. And I had a lot of opinions about how software organizations were kind of messed up. And I went to work for a small software company in Atlanta called Version 1. They did like an agile project management software. If anybody's familiar with like Scrum and XP and stuff. So it was like a agile project management tool. And the way I'll describe it is it was like getting an MBA in organizational dysfunction over about a 2-year period. And so I had this idea that I wanted to go out on my own and just be an independent consultant. And so that was what my initial launch was. And the thing about starting a consulting company is that if you're able to sell and market yourself and get clients, you're profitable right away, right? So there's no R&D time, there's no product development. I mean, there is like product market fit. You have to have an offer that people want to pay you for. But we were able to grow, so we're about 125, 130 people now. Consulting companies are really, really hard to build, so I'm not recommending it. But sometimes that's a way to bootstrap a product, is if you've got some sort of service you can offer and start generating money, you can self-fund a little bit. It's kind of what we're doing some of now. We're starting some software companies to the side of my consulting company. So yeah, so we did $500,000 my first year. We peaked in 2020 at about 38. Had a couple of bad years in 22, 23. Consulting industry got hit super hard during those years. We were one of the ones that dropped down to about 20, rebuilt last year to about 33. And it's funny, you guys say ARR. There's no such thing as ARR in a consulting company because you're constantly re-earning it. So we're at about a $44 million run rate right now. So if we stay current course and speed, we'll hit about 44 to 50 this year and pretty profitable. So pretty cool.
When you started out, how was it like getting those first few customers?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating story because, like year 3 or 4, we hit the Gator 100 for the first time. You guys familiar with what that is? Yeah, it's pretty cool. And we were number 3 on the list. We were only like 8.2 million that year, but it's about rapidity of growth rather than absolute size. So we've bounced around that list over the years. We've been on it 6 times, which is pretty cool. And one time I got interviewed as part of, I guess it was probably that year that we hit number 3. And I always called myself an accidental entrepreneur. Like I knew that I wanted to, my initial goal was to make $250,000 a year and work part-time. And I'll joke that I failed miserably at that, right? I failed miserably at that goal. Because, running a company is not a part-time job, of course. And when you've got 120 some odd employees, there's a lot of work. But for me, it was a little bit of a frog in boiling water, right? So I had built a social media presence in the early days of social media. So early years of LinkedIn, early years of Twitter, when blogging was a thing. I was a blogger. We didn't have TikTok or Instagram or anything like that at the time. Not that we would have necessarily done that anyway. But while I was in corporate America, which is another thing to pay attention to, is I built that brand while I was working for other people. And so by the time I decided to launch, I had a presence. People knew who I was. And again, not recommended, but my wife and I, mostly my fault, had a bunch of credit card debt, no money in the bank, 3 little kids, stay-at-home mom. And we decided it was a good idea for me to quit my job and just go out and be an independent consultant. And woke up in cold sweat, for the first 6 months. But the funny thing is that it started working. And in those first 6 months, I didn't know exactly why it was working. So I spent a lot of time going, okay, what is it about marketing that's working? What is it about my sales approach that's working? What is it about this, right? All those things. And so, yeah, it was very much a frog in boiling water thing for me. It was like it just started working, And I'm like, okay, we'll keep going. And I had a couple pivotal moments in the early days. Like, it was the first time I sold a 6-figure deal. It was the first time I had ever brought anybody to help me. I didn't have employees at that time, so I subcontracted to a few friends of mine. And I was driving to Disney World with my family, making like $2,000 a day or something. I'm like, this is pretty cool. And then one time, we were trying to get a deal with SunTrust Banks, and I think we were like 6 people at that time. And they were like, we really like your pitch, we just don't think you're big enough to scale with us if we decide to go do this. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to ever hear that again, right? Because we want to solve big problems, right? And so, yeah, it was just a bunch of factors, and then we just kept going and going and going, and just built it. Learned a lot along the way.
What would scale your company like?
Well, the good thing about us is that we do a lot of business process engineering and technology. So I've seen failure modes of software companies as they scaled. So, it gave me a little bit of the ability to see around corners, around stuff. And in the early days, and it's probably still, maybe not quite as true now, but about every 15 people, it seemed like I had to re-engineer process, right? And so, when I'd come and talk at Bill's entrepreneur leadership classes, what I'd say is it's like scaling it. It's like when you're a startup in a garage and there's just like a small group of you, it's like everybody does everything. And then as you scale, what organizations tend to do is they want to organize by what people do, right? So you get functional silos in organizations. So you have the director of the dev team and the director of the QA team and the director of product management and such. And that scales infinitely as an org chart, but it's really, really bad as far as value production. Because the more people you have in functional silos in a large product organization, what starts to happen is you have to hire a lot of orchestration, project management, right? To stitch together resources across that organization. And then you have a theory of constraints problem, right? So work's flowing through the system in non-deterministic ways. Things take too long. You have wait states, all these kinds of things waste in the system. And so what starts to happen is that there's a lot of people busy and not a lot of people producing things. And so I think the biggest thing is to, for a software company in particular, is organize around the value producing parts of your technology architecture. So you have multiple capabilities within your product. And if you can organize around those capabilities and have dedicated teams of people that are relentlessly focused on value production and satisfying the needs of their customers for that part of the product, that's the winning formula. And then you try to create as few dependencies between that organization and the other parts of the organization as you can, because what slows organizations down is those wait states between different parts of the organization. So what my company does now, since we kind of soft pedaled me into this one, it's like the organizations we go into are mostly in vertical silos, and they're built on really poorly architected technology systems and really poorly architected data structures. And so what we've done is we've built a methodology and now some software to enable it. AI has really helped with that, not just from a ability to write code fast, but the ability to analyze code fast. So you go in and look at the organization, you go in and look at the technology, and then you start pulling it apart bit by bit and organizing around it. So we're doing a project right now for a really large home services company, actually, that's private equity owned. And they had a huge amount of value that was trapped in their inability to change their software systems effectively. And so we came in and we did some analysis and we created a value hypothesis. We created an extraction and modernization strategy and started pulling apart their legacy architecture bit by bit. And we were able to unlock about $1 million extra a day in revenue for them. Okay? And just furthermore, as AI becomes a thing in these big companies, that's actually the barrier to widespread AI adoption in most companies as well. Data's not organized well, applications aren't architected well, organizational design doesn't support it, so you can't pull through those business analytics like companies would like to.
Most of us in this room, I think, are either first-time founders or want to be first-time founders.
Yeah.
So obviously one of the biggest challenges is capital. So what advice do you have to people who are, looking to raise money for their first time, and how should they go about that?
So I have no experience with that. We did not raise money. okay? I will tell you from sitting in the entrepreneur and innovation classes over the years, I've heard some really, really funny pitches. Somebody earlier mentioned the idea of like, there's a $1 trillion addressable market if we get 5% of it, kind of a thing. I just don't see a world where most people are going to be able to get somebody to give them $3 or $4 million to bootstrap a product, right? And so the way that we teach software development is put the smallest thing out in the market that you can get feedback on. And then as you get feedback, then you get users, and the users start paying you, and that's the best way to validate that you're building the right thing if people will use it, especially if they'll pay you for it, right? So there's different strategies for that. So I'm a big fan of MVPs. I'm a big fan of getting your product to make money as soon as you can. Even in my consulting company, I had big visions. We're about 16 years old now. I had big visions for what I wanted this to be, but I didn't have 125 people that were made up of enterprise architects and data architects and high-level software engineers and business process people and former CIOs and CTOs that work for me. Just kind of me as like I was a project manager, right, when I started this. And so I sold what I could sell and then learned from my client need over time and then reinvested profits into it. So like I think that's part of the fallacy a little bit is that we think we can't do anything unless we have money to do it. Sometimes what you just need to do is live on a budget. Have a supportive partner in your life. Save some cash. Be able to live a little while without actually having a lot, right? And then if you can bootstrap it, kind of the cool thing about that is I haven't diluted any equity in my company. When I sell it, I have 100% of it. It's kind of cool. Nobody gets to tell me what to do, right? I'm not spending anybody else's money. So I get to explore the marketplace however I want. And when I'm profitable, I get to spend the money, right? And so there's other ways of going about this besides asking people for money.
Getting those first 10, 100, 1,000 users is probably the most difficult part in a software project. So how would you go about that?
Now remember, I'm a consulting guy, right? So I have opinions, but I don't necessarily, it's just all the same stuff people have been talking about, right? It's the same way that I would get clients. You have a social media presence, you do a lot of outbound marketing, you do some cold calling, you show up at events, you get your brand out there, you do a lot of videos, that kind of a thing. But I don't think there's a magic formula for it. It's you've got to have an idea that you think will work, and then you validate that by seeing if people actually use and pay for your product, and then you inspect and adapt your way into product market fit. Like, again, I don't know how to build a company with having millions of dollars in the bank. Well, I do now, but back then I didn't. But it's like if you can't find something that somebody wants to buy, it seems kind of obvious. There's a lot of great ideas out there. Like I have a lot of young entrepreneurs, they want to come to me for mentorship. And the first thing I ask them is like, who would pay for it? Like the gentleman that was up here earlier that started off in ed tech and then went into corporate. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems students might want to solve, but are they going to give you dollars for it? Might be great for free, or if you could sell ad services or something like that. So I don't know how to go get 10,000 software people. I'm going to figure it out this year because we actually just acquired a small AI prompting company that we're going to put some interest into. And what I'm going to do personally, and again, I assume this will work, but I don't know, is we're going to give, we think it's really valuable. We think people would use it, and we're going to give like a basic free version out. And then we're going to create a tiered model. We're going to create it self-service so they can provision it themselves. They can go up to the tiered model, and then if they want to do something at enterprise, then we can take them to enterprise. But I probably won't go that far if I can't get 10,000 people to do the free version. If I don't get any uptake on the free version, like why would I continue to invest in enterprise class stuff, right? If I want to take a flyer, if I believe so much in it that I want to do it, and I might, right? Because the cool thing about me is I have customers that are paying me to do consulting, and so we can try out some of our software build stuff on the companies that are actually already paying for us and they trust us. So I can get a lot of market validation that way, where maybe somebody who's just starting off can't. But yeah, like I took a little bit of a flyer, about a $500,000 investment, and if I can get 10,000 free users, I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to keep putting money into this thing. But if I can't get those first 10, if I got like 3 people and 2 of them are my cousins or something, like probably not going to spend any more money on this thing and just use it internally.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in the early stage of the company?
So I kind of look at building companies. I don't know. I'm going to ask you guys like mental image with me. Imagine like a dartboard, right? You have you start in the center and you have these lines that radiate out from it, right? So a functioning company has to have a lot of things. Eventually you need HR and payroll, right? We got to have payroll pretty early if you're hiring people. The first guy I ever hired, he's a guy I worked with at a previous company. I think at the time he was making $10,000 a month. We'd literally meet at Starbucks and I would give him a $10,000 check, right? And that was like payroll, right? And then you got to do some marketing and you got to do some finance and you have to have banking relationships. But then as you start to spiral and grow, you have to add and readdress those processes every step of the way. So eventually it got to the point, I literally think the first 3 or 4 people, we probably were mailing them checks, like handwritten checks. And then at some point you're like, okay, we could use like ADP or something like that and use a payroll service. Okay, cool. And then we did some things like my finance person started part-time, and then I moved her to full-time. And then we had a part-time HR person, because you gotta, at some point you gotta add health benefits in there, right? So as you're growing organically, you've got to think about like spiraling out that system, and you've got to figure out how to build all those pieces incrementally, because you can't actually invest in what you would like to have in the early days, right? You invest in what you can afford, because you got to be profitable. That's my rule. You got to be profitable all the time. Because if you're not making money, and it's just the other thing, right? It's a grind working as hard as we work if you're not making any money. It just is, right? I mean, it's hard to put in, like maybe you guys can do it when you're like 23 or something, but to be like a 55-year-old guy working this hard and like not making any money, that would suck. So that's probably the thing, is like, it's like building out processes while you're running the company, okay? And then because we're in the people business, we have a talent organization now that does recruiting and hiring and stuff like that. The biggest challenge for me is getting really, really good people. I mean, it's not hard to get good people. It's hard to find the good people and to know they're good people. And then, people have personalities, and people have bad days, and people have sick kids, and people have health issues. And so probably my biggest headaches right now are just like, hey, so-and-so didn't show up on the account Monday. We called his wife and nobody knows where he is. Like, okay, like what are you gonna do with that, right? So, because you think about it, right? So you care about that guy, but you also have a problem on the account. And if that guy doesn't show up, we might have to credit the company back a couple $1,000s or something, or maybe more sometimes. Yeah, so finding, training, retention, things like that. And plus what we do is really boutique. So it's not like I can go hire accountants and say, go do accounting. Or even go hire a software engineer and say, go write some code against these requirements. We have a fairly integrated change management platform. And getting people to conceptualize how our approach works so that they show up and can operate within that broader system, that's probably the net hardest thing I do.
With the way the world is going right now, obviously with AI, how do you think founders should be using it right now? And how should they be accelerating while leveraging the power of AI?
So that's a timely question, of course, right? I think about it in like multiple different levels. So like when I hire a software engineer, that software engineer needs to know how to, I don't like the word vibe code, but that, because that takes a negative connotation sometimes, because there's going to be a lot of really bad software written with vibe coding. But they have to know how to deploy those tools properly, but not use them as too much of a crutch. right? So that's like if you're a software person, like I think that's the trick. For me, we're still small enough that we're looking into how to create like agentic systems for our marketing team. And so I've challenged like my marketing team, they're the first one, how can I get 3 times the output without hiring any more people? I think that's totally doable, right? And still keep it human, right? Because I don't want a bunch of bots out there spamming the industry, right? So I need high quality, great content, but I want that processes around it to be AI enabled. Then we'll go to finance, then we'll go to HR, then we'll go to talent, right? We're looking at ways to use AI to streamline some of our consulting. Now, I think every small to mid-sized business should be doing that. Because if you're not using AI as a force multiplier in your world, it's going to drive your SG&A costs up compared to other people, sales, general administration, like back office expenses, things like that, if anybody doesn't know that word. But you should absolutely be thinking about an AI-enabled workforce to support the humans that are in the system. I think that's going to be table stakes here pretty soon. Then when you start to go into like what we do and how we consult, we had a funny instance this week, right? AI got really real for me literally this week because we're doing a project with a big publishing company, and we built this tool where we can ingest all of their code base and figure out how to pull it apart in alignment with their business objectives. It's really kind of neat. It's actually magic in a way. It's kind of cool. But we get in on the ground and they have 9 million lines of code. They have like JavaScripts that are like the AI loses context trying to read them. And so the guy who runs my innovation group comes up and he goes, yeah, we just spent like $10,000 and we're not even done with this in AI tokens. And I'm like, how many more 10,000s do you need? And he's like, I don't know. And so now we're like sitting here like, do we do open source AI on our own servers as a first cut, because I can do that for kind of free, and then you start moving it up into the cloud. So like the idea of like tiered application of AI governance, putting budgets on people. So I basically gave the guy like a $10,000 a month budget to go like, you can spend this without even talking to me. It's a really interesting frontier, and you've got to figure out how to be creative to do it. And then I go into like our big corporate customers, and there's so many interesting AI use cases right now. And where I see it going right now, I just bought a Tesla Model S a little while ago, right? That car drives itself. Have you ever been in a Tesla before? It's kind of really cool. I'm a little late to that party, but it's really cool. And so I see all kinds of cool little AI enablement things in products. So like AI-enabled products is super, super clear to me, right? But AI-enabled businesses at scale, like I think that's a little bit smoke and mirrors right now. Like I don't think we're quite there yet. So I think we're going to see some magic on this side of things, like a car that just drove me here last night in 6 hours, pulled off, had to get out and plug it in, got back in, it kept me driving, to over here where it's like magic on this side and smoke and mirrors on that side. And so I pay a lot of attention to AI press right now, as you might imagine. And I think sorting out what's really real versus what's hyperbole, or somebody just trying to sell GPUs, or people trying to get interest for their next round of investment. It's a very, very noisy field right now, in my opinion. And I get to see it from lots of angles right now.
And with that, I'd like to open up to questions from the crowd.
Hey, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
We moved from rapid developing companies, so it's gaining market share, and we're crushing with customers. And then we need to look back at that outward spiral of the missing pieces of the absolute nuts and bolts of what anyone born after 2000 has no idea.
Yeah.
Is there a good book or resource to kind of look at that roadmap of the missing pieces we might not have seen?
Okay, so this is a book I read 20 years ago, and I don't know if it's a good recommendation or not. But I'm going to tell you, I think about this book a lot. You ever read the book E-Myth? I can't think of the guy's name who wrote it. He did a revision of it, called it E-Myth Revisited. And what I took away from that book is when you start off, and I'll use my words in it, there's a really big difference from being a consultant to the owner of a consulting company. It's not the same thing. There's a difference between being an engineer and running an engineering company. or being a software person and running a software development company. Those are just two different things. And so the hypothesis in that book is, in the early days, you kind of do everything yourself. Once you get sufficient process in place, then you hire somebody to do something that's stable, right? And then you go to the next piece, you do something that's stable. And as my spiral has widened, like, there will be 6 months where I don't spend any time with my finance team other than a 30-minute forecast cash flow analysis or something like that. I've kind of ignored my sales team for the last 9 months. It's just things are happening. It's good, right? I don't have any worries about it. But then we get to a certain level, and that requires my attention again. So it's like, what I've found is as I map that wheel, I'm constantly paying attention to where the bottlenecks in my system are. And when I sense that something is starting to destabilize, that will get my attention for a season. And then I'll go put pressure on the other parts of the organization. And then I'll come back to it, and I'll bounce around and that kind of a thing. So I don't know if that's if that really answers your question, but the systems that run your company are absolutely as important as the things that you do. And so we're already starting to talk to investment bankers, and we're talking to a few private equities. So probably, my goal, it could happen sooner, probably will happen first quarter, second quarter next year. We'll likely have our company sold. And there's a point in the life of your company where your company makes a product, but then there's a point where your company becomes the product, right? So most of my attention right now is, I've had enough conversations with investment bankers and potential acquirers to know where they've poked at me over the last couple years. And so next time when I do this in 6 months, when they poke, I don't want there to be any give, right? So I'm hardening up the thing that is the product that is my company. Just constant vigilance, because I think systems left on their own will just degrade. Because what you find as an entrepreneur is that you can find people to do things for you, but it's really hard to get people to hold vision for you. And also human beings, most human beings, probably not a lot of us in this room, but most human beings that will come to work for you, they come to work for you because they can't start their own companies. They don't have the vision and the drive and the just grit and determination. So a lot of people come to work and they're like, they don't really say it like this, but they tell me what to do. And they want their job to be predictable, right? And the problem with predictability is that when you're in a marketplace that's constantly changing, predictability will kill you, right? So I'll get crap from my team sometimes. It's like, yeah, you're changing the stuff around here all the time, or why can't you tell me exactly the way I'm supposed to do this job? I'm like, because in 6 weeks it's gonna change, and you have to know how to think and adapt to changing situations. That's another thing it's just hard, right? Because people get in ruts and they want to do their thing and they get comfortable and they start coaching their kids' basketball team or something, and yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? It's just interesting, right? People. I probably say this 5 times a week. People doing people things, man. Whatever, it's cool.
Thank you for your time, Mike.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. And we all know that failure is an important part of growth. So I was wondering if there's any instances where maybe things didn't go your way, and what did you learn from that?
Great question. So I got lulled into a bit of complacency, okay? So I was doing all the things that I've just told you guys I was doing, but around 2017, 2018, I got really, really burnt out. And we were printing money at the time. Like, we were just making tons of money. And so that's the other thing, is sometimes when you're making a lot of money, the problems in your organization, it just kind of smooths them over, right? But so this is the first company I've ever started. I started when I was 40 years old. We had never had a down year. We had never had a down month. Like, everything had been up. And so I get really burnt out around 2018. And there's a happy ending to this story, but my wife got diagnosed with leukemia and went through a bone marrow transplant. So I took like a year and a half where I just pulled way back. Company was printing money, just let the company run for itself. Well, so I come back from that and I'm like, okay, you guys kind of jacked some of this stuff up a little bit. Okay, this isn't quite running like I would like it to have run. And then, so we went from that, we went to COVID, and so all our consultants were mostly traveling consultants. And so we weren't sure we were going to survive that, but we actually grew like crazy during that period. And then one of our largest clients was Ford Motor Company at the time. And they were running about $24 million a year with me, and they were about 60% of my portfolio. And they hit some stuff. They needed to pull about $2 billion out of their consulting and move it to electricity. And they're also having supply chain issues and chip shortages, and gas prices were up and interest rates were up, so they weren't selling a lot of cars. And they pulled a $24 million contract. And I just was not prepared to adjust to that as fast. And so I watched our bank account go from about 12 million liquid down to like 2, and I wasn't sure it was gonna stop. So I'm like sitting there like staring at this going, I might go out of business. Like, what am I gonna do here? So we laid off like 60, 70 people over about a year period, did most of it in one tranche. We did a small second tranche. We kind of stabilized the system. And then between 22, 23, early 24, it was like being in a startup again. Like you had to rebuild everything. You have to go out and sell when your ego and identity has been crushed and like you feel like a total failure, and you got to go out and tell these clients how great you are and all these great things you can do, and you just laid off half the team that you would use to go do it. And I mean, it was just an absolute mess. But about 24, it started smoothing out. And then last year, we didn't have our highest revenue year, but we had our highest profit year because we leaned a bunch of stuff out and got really efficient. And then this year, if we hit that 44 million, we'll do it at about 26% EBITDA. And it'll be the highest revenue, highest profit ever. So so I wouldn't be a real entrepreneur if I hadn't had some kind of crisis story. So looking back, now I'm like 2.5 years past it, super thankful for it, but it was like living hell going through it. And so I think the reality is no matter how good things are going, you never know, right? Markets shift. Right? They change. And so, like a lot of the advice I'd give to the entrepreneurship classes was save as much money as you can, because when you're young and you start making a lot of money, you're like, BMW, let's go. I mean, like build some reserves. Now, two things. So if I hadn't been sitting on that much cash, I would have had to act faster, which might have saved me some money. But having that much buffer and giving myself time is the only reason I'm in business right now. Because I didn't retain everybody, but the key people that I needed to rebuild it, I retained. So we went from like 38 million to 20. So it's not like we went to nothing, but it's kind of a shitty situation when you're running a non-profitable $20 million business, right? But you had to retain, we're a people business, so I had to retain enough of the people so I had something to build on top of. Right? So buffer risk wherever you can. That's how I think about it, right? And a lot of times that's with cash. A lot of times it's in relationship with key people around you. Kind of like telling my wife, like, this is going to be shitty for a couple years. Are you ready? She's like, okay, fine, whatever. And you just go, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tons of lessons learned during that time.
Right.
Life.
Thank you so much, Mike.
You're very
welcome.
Thank you.